The real estate listing notification hit my phone just as I was pouring my morning coffee. Luxury beachfront property, Seacliff Bay, just listed. My hands trembled as I clicked the link, coffee forgotten on my kitchen counter. There it was, my beach house, our beach house, with professional photos showcasing the renovations I'd poured my heart into for 3 years. The agent's name at the bottom of the listing made my stomach lurch. Cassidy Reed, Blake's new girlfriend. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm Samantha Thorne, Sam to everyone except my ex-husband Blake, who always insisted on using my full name like it was some kind of ownership claim. The same man who was now apparently trying to sell the property we'd bought together, without my knowledge or consent. The same man who'd moved his 20-something girlfriend into the home where I'd once dreamed of raising our family. This has to be a mistake, I muttered, scrolling through the photos. The vintage driftwood coffee table I'd restored myself, the hand-painted mural in the sunroom, even the antique brass telescope I'd inherited from my grandfather, all staged. Perfectly for someone else's dream purchase. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Olivia. Sam, please tell me you're seeing this listing. I was already dialing Diana Chen, my lawyer, as I paced my downtown apartment. After my split with Blake 2 years ago, I'd rebuilt my life piece by piece, channeling my interior design passion into a thriving home renovation consultation business. My latest project had just been featured in Coastal Living magazine. I'd finally felt like I was standing on solid ground again. Now this. Diana Chen speaking. My lawyer's crisp voice answered on the second ring. Blake's trying to sell the beach house, I blurted out. His girlfriend is the listing agent. He can't do this, right? The deed— Sam, breathe, Diana interrupted. Remember what we discussed when you first came to me? About the property deed? My hand instinctively went to the locked drawer in my home office where I kept the original paperwork. Of course, the clause my grandfather had insisted on when he helped us with the down payment. The same clause Blake had dismissed as old-fashioned nonsense and barely glanced at before signing. The property's deed had a surprise, one that Blake had apparently forgotten about. One that his ambitious new girlfriend, fresh out of real estate school and eager to make her first big sale, had clearly failed to check properly. Send me the listing, Diana continued. And Sam, don't contact Blake directly. Let me handle this. But my phone was already lighting up with his call. Speak of the devil. My sister Olivia's text flashed across the screen simultaneously. Coming over with emergency coffee and croissants. Don't do anything impulsive. Too late. My finger hovered over Blake's name as memories flooded back. The day we found the beach house. My grandfather's proud smile as he handed us the check for the down payment. The careful way he'd reviewed the paperwork with his old-school attention to detail. Property like this needs protecting, he'd said, giving me a meaningful look, like the women in our family. Sam? Diana's voice pulled me back. Promise me you won't. I have to go, I said quickly, ending the call. My hand was steady now as I answered Blake's incoming call, steel entering my voice. Hello, Blake? Were you planning to tell me about the sale? Or did you expect me to find out from Zillow like everyone else? The sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected me to discover the listing so quickly. Samantha, he started, using that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate during our marriage. Cassidy and I are simply testing the market. The beach house is just sitting there, and frankly, with your emotional attachment to the place, You thought it better to let your girlfriend list my property without consulting me? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound entirely stable. That's an interesting choice considering the deed's requirements. A pause. What requirements? We bought that house together, Samantha. I'm entitled to— Check the original deed, Blake. The one my grandfather insisted on. The one you were too busy talking about your investment portfolio to read properly. I could practically hear him scrambling to recall the details. Or better yet, have your girlfriend check. I'm sure as a licensed real estate agent, she'd be fascinated by Clause 7. The silence stretched out between us. In my mind's eye, I could see him in his sleek downtown office, probably wearing one of those pretentious blazers with elbow patches. He'd started sporting after making partner, the same office where I'd first discovered the lipstick-stained receipts from his late client meetings with Cassidy. "We should discuss this civilly," he finally said, his lawyer voice taking over. "Perhaps over dinner? That new place on Harbor Street?" "I prefer to discuss it with Diana present," I cut him off. "And Blake, take down the listing. You have 1 hour before I file a complaint with the real estate board about your girlfriend's oversight." I ended the call just as Olivia burst through my apartment door, armed with a tray of coffee cups and a paper bag that smelled like heaven. "Tell me you didn't do anything crazy," she demanded, kicking the door shut behind her. "Define crazy," I replied, reaching for the largest coffee cup. The text alert chimed again, a notification from Zillow. The beach house listing had been removed. If you want to find out what happens next and discover the truth about Clause 7 in the property deed, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Part 2 coming soon, where we'll uncover just how deep this deception goes, and why my grandfather's foresight might just be Blake's ultimate undoing. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's having an ironclad property deed. 2 hours after the listing disappeared, Victoria Martinez, my closest friend and real estate attorney, strode into my apartment with a thick folder under her arm. Her normally pristine suit was slightly wrinkled, suggesting she'd come straight from court to help me. Olivia was still stationed at my kitchen island, now surrounded by property documents we'd dug out of storage. "Tell me everything," Victoria demanded, dropping the folder on my coffee table. "And tell me why I had to hear about this from Diana instead of you." I gestured at the stack of papers Olivia was sorting. "I've been a bit busy excavating the past." My hands landed on an old photograph tucked between deed documents. Blake and me standing proudly in front of the beach house the day we got the keys. My grandfather's arm around my shoulders. His expression in the photo held a knowing look. I hadn't understood at the time. Victoria pulled out her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Blake's girlfriend just passed her real estate exam 3 months ago. First-year agent trying to list a $2 million property? Someone's getting a bit ahead of herself." "That's not the only thing she didn't check properly," Diana said, walking in without knocking. We'd grown close enough over the past 2 years that she had a key to my place. "I just got off the phone with the county recorder's office. The original deed is exactly as we remembered it." My phone buzzed. Another call from Blake. I declined it, watching as 3 more text messages popped up in quick succession. "He's panicking," Olivia observed, peering over my shoulder. "Good." The first message read, "Samantha, be reasonable. The beach house is just sitting there." The second, "Cassidy made an honest mistake." And the third, "We should talk about this like adults." Victoria snorted, reading the messages. "Like the adult who tried to sell property he doesn't have full rights to." I pulled out my grandfather's old leather journal from the bottom drawer of my desk. He'd passed away 6 months after Blake and I separated, but not before documenting everything about the beach house purchase in his meticulous handwriting. "Here," I said, flipping to a marked page, "the explanation of Clause 7. Diana took the journal, adjusting her glasses. "Your grandfather was brilliant, you know. 30 years as a family law judge taught him every trick in the book, and every way to prevent them." A knock at the door made us all freeze. Through the peephole, I saw Cassidy Reed herself, looking every bit the polished real estate agent in her designer suit and expensive heels. Behind her, Blake stood with his hands in his pockets, that familiar apologetic expression on his face. The same one he'd worn when I found those receipts. "Don't open it," Olivia warned, but I was already turning the handle. Time to face this head-on. "Samantha," Cassidy stepped forward, hand extended like we were meeting at an open house. "I feel we got off on the wrong foot. If we could just discuss the listing." "The illegal listing," Victoria cut in, moving to stand beside me, "of property you had no right to market." Blake pushed past Cassidy, trying to take control of the situation. "Now wait a minute. I co-own that house. I have every right to—" "Actually," Diana interrupted, holding up my grandfather's journal, "you don't. Not according to Clause 7 of the original deed, the one you signed without reading." She turned to Cassidy. "As a licensed agent, you did pull the original deed records before listing the property, correct?" The younger woman's confident facade cracked slightly. Blake provided the documentation." "Partial documentation," I corrected. "Tell me, did he mention that my grandfather's contribution to the down payment came with specific conditions? That his help secured certain property rights?" Blake's face had gone pale. "Those old documents can't possibly be legally binding," Victoria supplied. "Oh, but they are. You see, Judge Robert Thorne didn't just help with the down payment. He structured the entire purchase to protect his granddaughter's interests." She pulled out a document from her folder. "In fact, I have the original memorandum of understanding right here. The one you also signed, Blake. Probably while you were too busy bragging about your latest court victory to read the fine print." Cassidy's perfect posture had started to wilt. "Blake assured me he had full co-ownership rights." "Blake assured me a lot of things too," I said quietly. "Like fidelity in our marriage. Look how that turned out." The color drained from Cassidy's face as the implication hit her. She turned to Blake. "You said your divorce was finalized before we—" "It was," he snapped. "This is just Samantha being difficult. She's always been emotional about that house." "Emotional?" Diana's voice could have frozen fire. "Let's talk about the legal implications of attempting to sell property without proper authority, especially as a licensed real estate agent." She focused on Cassidy. "That's the kind of thing that could end a career before it begins." My phone chimed with an email notification. The county recorder's office responding to Diana's inquiry with the full deed documentation. I handed my phone to Cassidy. "Read Clause 7. Out loud, please." Her manicured fingers trembled slightly as she read. "In consideration of the financial contribution made by Judge Robert James Thorne, it is hereby agreed that the property cannot be sold, transferred, or listed for sale without the express written consent of Samantha Rose Thorne. In the event of marital dissolution, full ownership rights revert to Samantha Rose Thorne, with all subsequent decisions regarding the property's disposition resting solely in her authority." The silence that followed was deafening. Blake looked like he'd been hit with a bucket of cold water. "That's not— There must be a way to contest this." "You had your chance to contest it," Victoria said, "during the divorce proceedings. But you were so focused on keeping your downtown penthouse and your precious car collection that you barely glanced at the beach house settlement." I thought of all the weekends I'd spent renovating that house while Blake worked late at the office with Cassidy, as it turned out. The mornings I'd watched the sunrise over the ocean from the deck my grandfather had helped me design. The dreams I'd had of raising a family there. Dreams that had shattered the night I discovered the truth about Blake's mentoring of his young legal assistant. "I want you both out of my house," I said quietly. "You have 48 hours to remove your belongings. You can't just—" Blake started, but Cassidy cut him off. "Stop." She stepped away from him, professional mask cracking completely. "Just stop. Do you have any idea what this could do to my license? My reputation?" She turned to me. "I apologize for the unauthorized listing. It will not happen again. As they left, I heard Cassidy's last words to Blake in the hallway. We are going to have a very long conversation about what else you haven't told me. Olivia waited until the door closed before hugging me fiercely. Grandpa would be so proud of you right now. I picked up the old photograph again, tracing my grandfather's face with my finger. He'd known, somehow. Known that the beach house wasn't just a property investment, but a safety net. A foundation for my future, protected from whatever storms might come. Diana was already packing up her files. I'll draw up an official cease and desist, just to be safe. And Sam? Think about what you want to do with the house now. It's yours, free and clear. No shadows, no ghosts. Victoria grinned. I might have some ideas about that. Ever consider turning it into a luxury short-term rental? With your design skills and my real estate expertise? For the first time since seeing that listing, I felt myself smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving someone wrong, it's building something new from the ashes of their mistakes. And I had just the blueprint in mind. Morning light streamed through the beach house windows as I walked through the empty rooms, the sound of waves a gentle backdrop to my footsteps. The space felt different now, lighter somehow, despite the scattered moving boxes Cassidy had left behind. She'd taken her things but forgotten the little details that marked her brief occupation. A designer throw pillow here, a scented candle there, all attempting to mask the home's true character with generic luxury. Victoria followed behind me, with her tablet, already in full business mode. The rental market in Seacliff Bay is exploding right now. With your design aesthetic and this location, we could command top dollar. She paused, watching me run my hand along the vintage driftwood banister my grandfather had helped me restore. That is, if you're sure about this. The doorbell chimed before I could answer. Through the stained glass panels, I recognized Mrs. Adelaide Reynolds' silvery hair. My elderly neighbor had been here longer than anyone else on the beachfront, her Victorian house a landmark in its own right. "Sam, darling," she called through the door. "I saw your car and brought coffee." "Real coffee? Not that pretentious stuff your ex's little friend kept trying to give me." I opened the door to find her balancing a thermos and a folder stuffed with papers. "Mrs. Reynolds, you're a lifesaver." "Adelaide, please. After what that man put you through, we're well past formalities." She settled into her favorite spot in my sunroom, eyeing the half-empty bookshelves where Blake's law books had once lived. Much better already. Those legal volumes were giving the room negative energy. Victoria accepted a cup of coffee with a knowing smile. "Did you bring what we discussed?" Adelaide patted her folder. "Every document from the neighborhood council meetings for the past 30 years. Including," she pulled out a thick stack of papers with fluorescent sticky notes, "the original zoning regulations your ex-husband's girlfriend conveniently overlooked." My phone buzzed. A text from Diana. "Blake's law firm just requested copies of all beach house documentation. Want me to make them work for it?" "What's he plotting now?" Victoria read over my shoulder, frowning. Adelaide sniffed disapprovingly. Probably realized what his little sales scheme could cost him professionally, trying to cover his tracks. A knock at the back door interrupted us. Through the kitchen window, I saw Olivia juggling grocery bags. "Emergency supplies," she called out, "and information you need to hear." I helped her unload fresh pastries and fruit onto the kitchen island, noting her unusually serious expression. "What's wrong?" "You know how I work in medical records?" Olivia began, arranging croissants on a plate. "Well, guess who came in requesting copies of your old therapy sessions from after the divorce? Sessions protected by doctor-patient confidentiality?" My hands stilled on the coffee cups I was filling. Blake wouldn't dare. "His new junior partner tried to," Olivia corrected, "claimed they needed to establish a pattern of emotional instability regarding property decisions." Victoria's phone chimed with an email alert. Her sharp intake of breath made us all turn. They just filed a motion challenging the deed transfer. Blake's claiming your grandfather exercised undue influence during the original purchase, taking advantage of his position as a former judge. The room spun slightly. I gripped the counter, feeling the smooth marble under my palms, marble I'd selected and had installed myself during those long months of renovation therapy after Blake's betrayal. "Oh, that foolish man," Adelaide muttered, rifling through her folder. "Sam, dear, do you remember when you first looked at this house? When your grandfather brought you to the council meeting?" The memory surfaced slowly. Myself at 26, freshly engaged to Blake, sitting in the Seacliff Bay Town Hall while my grandfather presented our case for the property purchase. "The zoning variance," I breathed. "Blake wasn't there." "Exactly." Adelaide triumphantly held up a document. "Your grandfather wasn't acting as a judge that day. He was representing you as family because your fiancé was too busy to attend a crucial meeting about his own future home. It's all in the minutes." My phone lit up with another text, this time from Diana. "Don't worry about the therapy records. Medical privacy laws are on our side. But Sam, there's something else you should see." 15 minutes later, Diana's town car pulled into my driveway. She emerged with a manila envelope and an expression that mixed concern with satisfaction. "Remember how your grandfather kept records of everything?" She spread the contents of the envelope across my dining room table. Emails, bank statements, handwritten notes. "After you told me about Blake's claims, I had my assistant dig deeper into the original purchase timeline. Your grandfather didn't just help with the down payment. He spent months researching property laws, consulting with other judges about protecting generational assets." Victoria picked up one of the emails. "This is correspondence with Blake's father. Apparently, he had concerns about his son's financial judgment even back then." "Keep reading," Diana urged. My eyes caught on a particular line. "Robert, my son sees this beach house as another status symbol. Your granddaughter sees it as a home. I fear Blake will never understand the difference." "There's more," Diana continued. "Your grandfather created a separate trust for the property maintenance. Money Blake never knew about because he skipped the estate planning meetings." Adelaide leaned forward. "Is that why he couldn't sell when he tried? The trust restrictions?" "Partly," Diana confirmed. "But mostly it was Judge Thorne's foresight in structuring the deed itself. He'd seen too many cases of property disputes destroying families. He wasn't about to let that happen to Sam." Olivia squeezed my hand. "Grandpa always said Blake reminded him of defendants who looked good on paper but couldn't meet his eyes in court." A new email notification popped up on my laptop from the Seacliff Bay Historical Society. The subject line made my heart skip. "Urgent. Historical designation consideration." Victoria read it over my shoulder, her eyes widening. "They want to designate the entire beachfront strip as historically significant? That would affect any future development plans." "Including Blake's," Adelaide said smugly. "Did I mention I chair the Historical Society Board?" I stared at her. "You didn't." "I also didn't mention that your grandfather helped establish the Society's preservation guidelines 30 years ago." She sipped her coffee with a satisfied smile. "Guidelines that make it nearly impossible to significantly alter designated properties without extensive community review." Diana was already typing on her phone. "This changes everything. Blake can challenge the deed all he wants, but historical designation would add another layer of protection." "Protection I'm not sure we need," I said slowly, an idea forming. "What time is it in London?" Victoria checked her watch. "Almost evening. Why?" I pulled up my email, finding the message I'd been saving. "Remember that British restoration company that contacted me after my design work was featured in Coastal Living? They specifically mentioned wanting to partner with someone who understood historical properties." Understanding dawned on Olivia's You're not just going to rent the beach house." "No," I smiled, feeling truly confident for the first time in days. "I'm going to turn it into something bigger. A showcase for historical renovation, a learning center for sustainable restoration techniques." I turned to Adelaide. "Starting with your Victorian masterpiece if you're interested." "Darling," she beamed, "I thought you'd never ask." My phone buzzed one final time. Blake again. But now, looking at these women gathered around my dining room table, at the evidence of my grandfather's careful planning and faith in my future, his attempts at intimidation felt as insubstantial as sea foam. I picked up Diana's folder of trust. Documents. Time to remind my ex-husband that some things can't be bought, sold, or manipulated. Some things are built to last. Victoria raised her coffee cup. "To foundations that can't be shaken. To history that can't be rewritten," Adelaide added. "To family who see what's coming," Olivia continued. "To making something beautiful out of spite," I finished. And for the first time since this all began, my laughter held nothing but joy. The London Restoration Company's video call illuminated my beach house living room as evening settled over Seacliff Bay. Their lead architect, Emma Blackwood, leaned forward in her frame, clearly intrigued by the property's original crown moldings, visible behind me. "These details are extraordinary, Ms. Thorne. American craftsman meets Victorian maritime, quite rare for this coast." "Please call me Sam." I adjusted my laptop screen. "And yes, the architectural heritage here is unique. The entire beachfront strip tells a story of American coastal development." A notification slid across my screen, an email from Blake's law firm marked urgent. I minimized it without opening. This moment was too important to let him intrude. "We're particularly interested in your vision for a restoration education center," Emma continued. "The sustainable preservation techniques you mentioned." The doorbell interrupted, followed by insistent knocking. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar woman in a sharp business suit. My heart sank as I recognized the folder. She carried legal documents. "I'm so sorry," I said to Emma. "Could you excuse me for just a moment?" I opened the door to find a young process server looking uncomfortable. "Samantha Thorne? I have documents regarding Westbrook versus Thorne. Petition for property evaluation and temporary usage injunction." My phone buzzed with Diana's incoming call as I signed for the papers. "Already on it," she said before I could speak. "Blake's trying to force a professional appraisal and block any changes to the property while his challenge to the deed is pending." The process server retreated quickly as Victoria's car pulled into my driveway, gravel crunching under her tires. She emerged with a stack of folders and a determined expression I'd come to recognize. "Emma?" I returned to my laptop. "I apologize, but could we reschedule? A situation has come up." The British architect nodded knowingly. "Property disputes can be delicate. We'll send some preliminary proposals for your review. And Sam, don't let legal complications deter you. The best preservation projects often face initial resistance." Victoria was already spreading documents across my coffee table when I ended the call. "Blake's getting desperate. Look at the language in this injunction request. He's claiming your renovation plans would irreparably alter the property's market value. The property he tried to sell without authority?" I scanned the papers. "The one whose historical significance he ignored?" "He's trying to tie your hands," Victoria confirmed. "Prevent any changes while he builds a case. But here's what he doesn't know." She pulled out a thick folder stamped with the county seal. "I rushed these through this afternoon. Your preliminary permits for historical renovation were approved 2 hours ago." My phone chimed with a text from Olivia. "Cassidy just came to the hospital for her records, too. She looked upset. Want me to find out why?" Before I could respond, Adelaide appeared at my back door, waving a stack of papers. "Emergency meeting of the Historical Society Board," she announced, letting herself in. You'll never guess what we discovered in the archives. She spread black and white photographs across my table, carefully preserved images of Seacliff Bay from the 1920s. Your house, dear, was originally built by Elizabeth Whitmore, one of the first female architects on the West Coast. She designed... It is a women's art colony. Victoria leaned closer. Wait, seriously? Oh, yes. Adelaide's eyes sparkled. The property deed restrictions protecting female ownership? They're not just from your grandfather. He was actually reviving a historical precedent. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up one of the photos. Women in long skirts stood on my front porch, easels and architectural drawings visible through the windows. Why didn't I know about this? Because Elizabeth's contribution was deliberately obscured by her husband after their divorce, Adelaide explained. He tried to take credit for her designs, but she'd hidden her original plans. In fact, she dug deeper into her folder. They were discovered during renovations in 1975, hidden in a wall cavity. Your grandfather helped authenticate them when he was still a practicing attorney. The doorbell rang again. This time, Cassidy stood on my porch, looking nothing like the polished real estate agent who'd tried to sell my house. Her eyes were red, her designer suit wrinkled. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "There's something you need to know about Blake's plans for the property." Victoria moved protectively closer, but I gestured for Cassidy to enter. She perched uncertainly on the edge of my sofa, taking in the scattered historical photos. "Blake's been lying to everyone," she began, twisting her hands together. "Not just about the deed. He's been working with developers for months, planning to tear down the entire beachfront strip and build luxury condos." Adelaide gasped. "He wouldn't dare." "That's why he was so angry about the historical designation possibility," Cassidy continued. "The developers have already drawn up plans. They promised him a penthouse in the new building and a percentage of sales. Her voice cracked slightly. "He said it would be our fresh start." "And now," Victoria prompted, "now I know he never intended to include me in the ownership structure. The development contract is in his name only. Just like," she glanced at me, "just like he never intended to put my name on the deed here, even after he promised." My phone lit up with another call from Diana. "Sam, Blake just filed an emergency motion to block the historical designation review. Claims it would constitute discriminatory property restrictions based on gender." A strange calm settled over me as pieces clicked into place. He's trying to use Elizabeth Whitmore's original deed restrictions against us, claiming they're outdated and illegal. "It won't work," Adelaide declared. "I've already spoken with the State Historical Preservation Office. They're fascinated by Elizabeth's story. Want to fast-track the designation process." Cassidy stood abruptly. "There's something else. In Blake's office, there's a safe. He keeps documents there, things he doesn't want anyone to find, including..." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo. This letter from his father, about the beach house purchase. The image showed handwritten pages, yellow with age. My eyes caught phrases, "son's reckless financial decisions," and "pattern of manipulation," and finally, "agree with Judge Thorne's concerns." "Why are you showing me this?" I asked quietly. Cassidy's shoulders straightened. "Because I'm tired of being used as a pawn in someone else's game. Because I actually care about historical properties. It's why I became a real estate agent. And because..." She gestured at the photos of Elizabeth Whitmore's art colony. "Some things shouldn't be buried." Victoria was already typing on her tablet. "I'm calling our contact at the State Board of Realtors. Blake's development scheme could be seen as deliberate misrepresentation, especially if he was advising Cassidy to list property without proper authority." My laptop chimed with a follow-up email from Emma Blackwood. The subject line read, "International Heritage Preservation Grant Opportunity, Time Sensitive." looking around my living room, at Elizabeth's photographs, at the evidence of generations of women fighting to protect their creations, at the unlikely alliance forming between former adversaries, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about keeping a house anymore. It was about preserving a legacy, one that reached far beyond my grandfather's protective instincts. "Cassidy," I said slowly, "how would you feel about being part of something bigger than luxury condo sales?" She met my eyes, understanding, dawning. "You mean, help us protect this place?" I gestured to the historical photos. "Not just my house, the whole beachfront. Its history, its purpose. Be on the right side of this story." Adelaide beamed. "I could use help cataloging. The Historical Society archives. There's probably more of Elizabeth's work hidden away, waiting to be rediscovered. And I know some excellent property attorneys," Victoria added pointedly, "in case someone needs representation against a former employer." My phone buzzed. One final time, Blake again. But his attempts at control felt increasingly hollow against the weight of history we'd uncovered, against the strength of women supporting women across generations. I reached for Emma's email, ready to reply. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. It's building something so magnificent that those who tried to destroy it are forever remembered as being on the wrong side of history. The morning fog rolled in from the ocean as I led Emma Blackwood through the hidden spaces of Elizabeth Whitmore's former art colony. The British architect ran her fingers along the original baseboards, pausing at subtle markings I'd never noticed before. "These are artist signatures," she murmured, crouching down with her phone's flashlight. "Look, dated 1924. The women who lived here left their mark." A sharp rap at the front door interrupted our exploration. Through the beveled glass panels, I recognized the stern silhouette of Marcus Westbrook, Blake's father. Emma caught my expression and squeezed my arm. "Want me to stay?" I shook my head. "I need to handle this. Would you mind checking the upstairs east wing? That's where we found the original architectural plans." Marcus waited until Emma disappeared up the stairs before speaking. "Samantha, we need to discuss my son's recent decisions." His choice of words made me smile grimly. "You mean his attempt to illegally sell property he doesn't control? Or his secret development plans?" "Both." Marcus settled into an antique armchair, one I'd restored myself during those long weekends when Blake was supposedly working late. "I've spent 40 years building the reputation of Westbrook Law. I won't let Blake destroy it with this foolishness." My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "State Historical Board reviewing emergency protection order. Adelaide's testifying. Via Zoom in 20 minutes. Your father and I were colleagues," Marcus continued, his voice heavy with unspoken meaning. "When he expressed concerns about Blake's financial judgment, I should have listened." The stairs creaked as Emma descended, her expression bright with discovery. "Sam, you absolutely must see this. We found—" She stopped short, noting the tension in the room. "It's all right," I assured her. "Mr. Westbrook was just leaving." "Actually," Marcus stood, straightening his tie, "I came to give you this." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket. "Blake doesn't know I kept copies." Inside were original correspondence between Marcus and my grandfather, discussions about Blake's spending habits, concerns about his character, and most importantly, drafts of additional property protection clauses that had never made it into the final deed. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Because I just came from a partners meeting where Blake tried to convince the firm to back his development scheme. He's not just risking his own reputation anymore." Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. "Your grandfather was right about everything, including you." Emma waited until his car disappeared down the beach road before speaking. "Well, that was dramatic. But wait until you see what we found upstairs." She led me to the east wing, where original hardwood floors gleamed beneath decades of lesser materials. In the corner, partially hidden by old wallpaper, was a small door I'd somehow never noticed. A dumbwaiter, Emma explained, already working, to expose the opening. But look at the mechanism. The pulley system had been modified, creating a hidden storage space behind the shaft. And there, preserved in oilcloth and still crisp after nearly a century, were Elizabeth Whitmore's personal journals. My hands trembled as I opened the first volume. The handwriting was clear, determined. They say women cannot understand architecture, that our minds are too flighty for proper design. So be it. Let them underestimate us while we build our own sanctuary. My laptop chimed with an email from the State Historical Board. They were upgrading the beach house's protected status to include its role in documenting architectural gender discrimination. Blake looked lost, his usual confidence shattered. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Would you have listened?" Eleanor asked quietly. "You couldn't even see what was right in front of you. A house full of history, of women's resilience. You were too busy trying to tear it down to build something shiny and new." Emma's team had uncovered another hidden panel, this one containing architectural drawings unlike anything we'd seen before. "These are revolutionary," Emma breathed. She was designing sustainable buildings decades before it became a movement. "Of course she was," Eleanor said proudly. Elizabeth knew the future belonged to those who could build something lasting, something that served more than just profit. Victoria was already drafting press statements, weaving together the historical discoveries with the modern attempt to erase them. Diana coordinated with the Historical Society, ensuring every document would be properly preserved. My phone lit up with a final message from Marcus. "Board of Directors calling emergency session. Firm's entire historical portfolio under review." Blake sank into a chair, the weight of generations of deception finally settling on his shoulders. "What happens now?" Eleanor placed Elizabeth's manuscript in my hands. Now we do what Elizabeth always intended. We tell the truth, all of it, and we make sure no one ever forgets what happened here, not just in 1924, but in 2025. When another Westbrook man tried to bury another woman's legacy and found himself buried by history instead. The manuscript's pages rustled with promise, with vindication, with the power of stories finally ready to be told. Outside, the media lights illuminated the beach house like a beacon, while inside, generations of women's voices emerged from the walls themselves, demanding to be heard. The renovation team arrived at dawn, their trucks lining the curved driveway of the beach house. Emma stood beside me, reviewing blueprints as the morning sun painted the waves gold. The original art studio space should be fully restored within 6 weeks, she announced, pointing to the eastern wing. Though what we found in the walls might delay things a bit. I smiled, thinking of the treasures we'd discovered during the initial assessment. More journals, sketches, even old photographs documenting the artistic haven Elizabeth Whitmore had created. But it was this morning's discovery that had stopped everyone in their tracks. "Ms. Thorne?" One of the workers called from inside. "You need to see this." Behind carefully removed wood paneling, a hidden compartment revealed stacks of letters, their paper brittle with age. But it wasn't the letters themselves that made my breath catch. It was the official letterhead they bore. Westbrook and Associates. Legal counsel, Estirm 1898. Blake's great-grandfather's firm, Victoria breathed, peering over my shoulder. But why would Elizabeth Whitmore hide correspondence from them? My phone buzzed. Diana, responding to the photos I'd sent earlier. "Don't touch anything else," she warned. "I'm bringing in a document preservation specialist. Those letters could change everything." Emma was already documenting the discovery, her camera clicking rapidly. "The timing matches a gap in Elizabeth's journals," she noted. 3 months where she stopped writing entirely. A familiar car pulled into the driveway. Marcus Westbrook again, this time accompanied by an elderly woman I didn't recognize. She moved slowly but purposefully, her eyes sharp as they took in the renovation work. "Samantha," Marcus called out, "I'd like you to meet my Aunt Margaret. She has something you need to hear." Margaret Westbrook didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Those letters you found," she said, settling onto the porch swing. "I know what they contain. I've kept the secret for 60 years, but perhaps it's time the truth came out." Victoria appeared with chairs for everyone as Margaret began her story. Elizabeth Whitmore wasn't just fighting developers back then. She was fighting my grandfather, Blake's great-grandfather, who tried to claim ownership of her designs. "The same thing Blake tried to do to Sam," Victoria murmured. Margaret nodded grimly. History has a way of repeating itself, especially in families. She pulled out an old leather portfolio. "I took these from the firm's archives years ago, protecting them from interested parties. Inside were original contracts, drafts of property deeds, and most damning of all, evidence of a systematic attempt to discredit Elizabeth's architectural achievements." "But she outsmarted them," Margaret continued, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Created a trust that would protect not just the property, but its intended purpose, a space for women to create without male interference." My phone lit up with a message from Olivia. "Blake just tried accessing Grandpa's sealed court records. Judge denied the request." "He won't stop," I said quietly. "Even now." "No," Margaret agreed. "Just like his great-grandfather didn't stop." But Elizabeth had allies they never suspected. She smiled. "Including my grandmother, who secretly helped her hide her most important works." Emma, who had been examining the newly discovered letters, suddenly straightened. "These aren't just legal correspondence. They're evidence of fraud, attempts to forge Elizabeth's signature on property transfers." Diana's voice crackled through my phone's speaker. "Just like the documents Blake tried to create for the development deal. Sam, we need to go public with all of it, past and present." A new voice joined the conversation, Adelaide, arriving, with an armful of historical society documents. "The State Preservation Office isn't just interested in the architecture anymore. They want to designate this as a site of women's legal history." Margaret touched one of Elizabeth's letters gently. "It was never just about the building. It was about creating a legacy that couldn't be stolen or destroyed." My laptop chimed with an urgent email. The British Heritage Trust. "International grant approved," I read aloud. "Full funding for restoration and educational programming." Victoria was already making calls. "We need to schedule a press conference. This story is bigger than just your fight with Blake." As if summoned by his name, another car appeared. Cassidy, looking determined. "Blake's called an emergency meeting with the developers," she announced. "He's trying to prove the historical claims are exaggerated." Margaret laughed softly. "Oh, my dear grandnephew, still fighting battles he doesn't understand." I looked around at the construction teams carefully uncovering Elizabeth's hidden treasures, at Emma documenting each discovery, at these women spanning generations united in preserving something precious. Schedule the press conference, I decided, but not here. At Westbrook and Associates. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. In Blake's own territory? Elizabeth Whitmore faced down the first generation of Westbrook men in their own office, Margaret said approvingly. Seems fitting. My phone buzzed again. Blake. But this time, instead of threats, his message held a different tone. "Dad showed me the old files. We need to talk." "He's scared," Cassidy observed. The development deal was leveraged against future profits. Without it, he could lose his partnership, Marcus finished, speaking for the first time since arriving. The firm won't tolerate another scandal. Emma held up one of Elizabeth's photographs, women standing proudly in front of the beach. house, their art displayed behind them. You know what's remarkable? Even after everything they faced, they kept creating, kept building. Adelaide was already drafting press releases. The public will love this. A century-old story of women's resilience, rediscovered just when another Westbrook man tried to repeat history's mistakes. Margaret stood slowly, her hand trailing along the porch railing. Elizabeth used to say that men might own the law firms, but women owned the truth. She believed eventually truth would win. A construction worker called out. They'd found another hidden compartment, this one containing architectural drawings unlike anything we'd seen before. Elizabeth's vision for the future of her sanctuary, dated just before her death. Looking at those drawings, at the legacy of strength and creativity they represented, I made a decision. Tell Blake I'll meet him, not to negotiate, but to explain what's coming. Victoria raised an eyebrow. And what exactly is coming? I picked up Elizabeth's journal, my grandfather's protective deed clauses, and Margaret's preserved evidence. The truth. All of it, in a way even he can't ignore. As the renovation team continued their careful work, uncovering more of Elizabeth's hidden history, I felt her presence in every revealed secret, every preserved detail. She'd created this sanctuary not just for herself, but for all the women who would come after her, knowing we would need a place to stand our ground. Blake thought he was fighting for a piece of property. He never understood he was fighting against a legacy of women who had already won this battle, generation after generation. Now it was my turn to protect what they had built, to add my own chapter to their story of resilience. The marble lobby of Westbrook and Associates gleamed cold and imposing as I strode through its doors, Elizabeth's original blueprints tucked securely in my portfolio. Diana walked beside me, while Victoria and Emma followed close behind. The security guard's eyes widened as he recognized me. The woman who'd once organized the firm's holiday parties now returning as an adversary. "Ms. Thorne?" He nodded, reaching for his phone. "Mr. Westbrook is expecting you." "Which one?" I asked quietly, but the elevator was already opening to reveal Marcus, his expression grave. "The partners are assembled in the main conference room," he said, falling into step beside us. "Blake doesn't know about Margaret's evidence yet." The familiar journey to the top floor felt surreal. How many times had I made this trip during my marriage, playing the role of supportive wife? At firm functions? The last time I'd been here was the day I discovered the truth about Blake and Cassidy, the day everything changed. The conference room doors opened to reveal a full house. Every partner sat around the massive oak table, with Blake at the far end beside the development company's representatives. His confident smirk faltered when he saw his father accompanying us. "Before we begin," Blake started, shuffling papers importantly, "this meeting is for essential personnel only. I don't see why we need—" "Actually," Diana interrupted smoothly, "everyone here is essential to understanding exactly what's at stake." She began distributing copies of Elizabeth Whitmore's letters, including the historical pattern of behavior at this firm. Emma stepped forward, opening her laptop to project a series of images onto the wall screen. "These are the original architectural drawings for the beach house, dated 1924. And these," she clicked to the next slide, "are the fraudulent documents attempting to credit the design to Jonathan Westbrook, dated the same year." A murmur ran through the assembled partners. Blake's face had gone pale. "This is ancient history." "Is it?" Victoria produced copies of the recent development contracts. "Because these modern documents show a remarkably similar pattern of attempted property appropriation." My phone buzzed. A message from Cassidy. "In the building. Found something in Blake's office you need to see. Coming up." Marcus cleared his throat. "There's more." He placed a stack of letters on the table. My Aunt Margaret preserved evidence of the firm's systematic attempts to discredit female property owners, a practice that, it seems, continued. well into recent years. The development company's lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Westbrook, the elder Mr. Westbrook, are you suggesting this firm has a documented history of fraudulent property acquisition attempts? Yes. Margaret's voice rang out as she entered, supporting herself with a carved wooden cane. Though some of us tried to protect the evidence. Blake stood abruptly. This is absurd. You can't possibly expect. Expect what? Cassidy appeared in the doorway, holding a familiar leather binder. That someone would find the fake property transfer documents you had me prepare? The ones you said were just contingency plans. The room erupted in whispered conversations. I caught fragments. Liability exposure and reputation risk, and immediate action required. Emma was still advancing through her slides, now showing the hidden compartments we'd discovered. The beach house itself preserved the evidence of its own history. Every attempt to erase Elizabeth Whitmore's legacy just ended up protecting it further. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Adelaide. State Historical Board representative arriving now. She's bringing the official protection order. Blake tried one last time. This property development deal would bring millions to the firm. Are we really going to let some ancient deed restrictions? Ancient? Margaret moved to the head of the table. I watched my grandmother help Elizabeth Whitmore hide her work from men like you. I kept these records safe for 60 years, waiting for the right moment, for someone strong enough to finally expose the truth. The conference room door opened again, admitting a distinguished woman in a pressed suit. I'm Catherine Martinez, from the State Historical Board. We've reviewed all the evidence, including the recently discovered documents. She placed an official-looking folder on the table. The beach house and surrounding properties have been granted immediate protected status as sites of significant historical and cultural importance. Blake slumped in his chair as the development company representatives began gathering their papers. Our firm will be withdrawing completely from this project, their lawyer announced. And Mr. Westbrook, expect to hear from our legal team about misrepresentation of property rights. Victoria stepped forward with another document. There's one more thing. The British Heritage Trust isn't just funding the restoration. They're establishing an international women's architectural history center at the beach house. The very property you tried to destroy will now preserve the stories of women like Elizabeth Whitmore, Emma added. Women who refuse to let men steal their creations. My phone buzzed again. Olivia, with perfect timing, found Grandpa's sealed records. Judge-approved release. You'll never guess what they show. I met Blake's eyes across the conference table. Your father was right to worry about your judgment, just like his grandfather should have worried about his. The senior partners were already convening in whispered clusters. Marcus touched his son's shoulder. The partnership vote is this afternoon. I suggest you start packing your office. Catherine was examining the architectural drawings with evident excitement. These designs were decades ahead of their time. The educational potential alone will ensure no one ever forgets what happened here, Margaret finished, past or present. As the room slowly emptied, I remained standing by the windows, looking out over the city toward the distant ocean, where my beach house waited. Diana squeezed my arm. Ready to go make history? Blake's voice cut through the remaining conversations. Sam, wait. He looked smaller somehow, his arrogance stripped away. I never understood any of it. The house, your grandfather's protections, even my own family's history. No, I agreed quietly. You were too busy trying to own things to understand their true value. The elevator ride down was silent, but as we exited into the lobby, Emma was already planning the next phase of restoration. Victoria fielded calls from reporters interested in the story. And Margaret. Margaret smiled like a woman who had finally set down a heavy burden. Outside, the afternoon sun caught the edge of Elizabeth's blueprints in my portfolio, making them glow like a beacon. A century of women's resilience, preserved and protected, ready to inspire future generations. Blake had never understood that some legacies can't be bought or sold. They can only be honored and preserved, passed down through time by those who recognize their true worth. The media frenzy erupted faster than anyone expected. By sunset, news vans lined Seacliff Bay's winding shore road, their satellite dishes, reaching toward the darkening sky like mechanical flowers. Inside the beach house, Emma and her restoration team worked steadily, carefully documenting each new discovery as reporters peered through the windows. "Associated Press on line 1, Victoria called out, juggling 3 phones. "They want exclusive rights to Elizabeth's story." I shook my head, watching as archaeological students carefully excavated another wall cavity. No exclusives. This story belongs to everyone. My laptop chimed with an urgent message from Marcus. Partnership vote. Complete. Blake suspended pending investigation. He's not taking it well. As if on cue, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Diana, reviewing documents at my dining table, looked up sharply. "Don't," but I was already answering. The voice on the other end wasn't Blake's, but a woman's, elderly and refined. "Is this Samantha Thorne? My name is Eleanor Westbrook, Blake's grandmother." The room stilled. Even Emma's restoration team paused their work, sensing something significant. "Mrs. Westbrook," I managed, putting the call on speaker. "I didn't expect—" "No one ever expects me, dear. That's been rather useful over the years." A pause, filled with the weight of untold stories. "I understand you found Elizabeth's letters." Victoria moved closer to the phone, her legal pad ready. Eleanor Westbrook had been notably absent from the firm's records, despite being married to its former managing partner. "I have something you need to see," Eleanor continued. "Something I've kept hidden since 1963. My driver is bringing me to the beach house now." The call ended before I could respond. Diana was already on her phone, verifying Eleanor's identity. "Blake's paternal grandmother," she confirmed. "Married into the Westbrook family in 1960. But here's the interesting part. Her maiden name was Whitmore." "Elizabeth's family?" Emma looked up from her restoration notes, eyes wide. "Second cousin," Margaret supplied from her perch near the window. "The marriage caused quite a scandal at the time. Now we might finally learn why." Headlights swept across the front gardens as a sleek vintage Rolls-Royce purred up the driveway, navigating carefully past the news vans. The driver emerged first, helping an elegant woman in her 80s from the back seat. She carried a leather attaché case that looked as aged as Elizabeth's hidden documents. I met her at the door, struck by her piercing blue eyes, the same shade as Blake's. "Welcome to my cousin's sanctuary," Eleanor finished, stepping inside. With remarkable vigor for her age, though she always intended it to be so much more. She paused in the entryway, taking in the careful restoration work, the exposed beams revealing hidden architectural features. "You found her secrets, but not all of them." The attaché case opened with well-oiled precision. Inside, wrapped in silk, lay a manuscript. "Elizabeth's memoirs," Eleanor explained. "The real story of what happened here and why the Westbrook men have fought so hard to control it." Margaret leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly. "You knew? All this time?" "I married Richard Westbrook for a reason." Eleanor's smile held steel beneath its elegance. "Someone had to protect Elizabeth's legacy from the inside." My phone buzzed again. Olivia. Blake just tried accessing the firm's archived security footage, looking for something specific. Eleanor nodded as if expecting this. "He won't find what he's looking for, because it's right here." She patted the manuscript. "The evidence that proves the Westbrook firm was built on stolen designs." Not just Elizabeth's, but dozens of women architects throughout the 1920s. The restoration team had stopped pretending to work, all attention focused on Eleanor's revelations. Emma's camera clicked quietly, documenting the moment. The beach house, Eleanor continued, moving to the window overlooking the ocean, was meant to be Elizabeth's testimony. Every hidden document, every concealed blueprint, was part of her plan to expose the truth. She just needed time for the right person to find it all. Victoria's phone chimed with breaking news alerts. The story of Elizabeth Whitmore's hidden. Archives had gone national. "Time's up," she murmured. As if summoned by the media attention, Blake's car screeched into the driveway. But he wasn't alone. Cassidy sat in the passenger seat, clutching a familiar-looking portfolio. The partnership files. Diana recognized it immediately. The ones that went missing in 1965. Eleanor smiled. Right on schedule. Blake burst through the door, then froze at the sight of his grandmother. "Nana, what are you—" "Cleaning up another Westbrook mess," Eleanor cut him off crisply. "Though this time, it seems we have help." She nodded to Cassidy, who stepped forward with the portfolio. "I found these behind the old filing cabinets," Cassidy explained. "Contracts showing how the firm systematically acquired properties from female architects during the Depression, using their financial distress as leverage." Eleanor opened Elizabeth's manuscript to a marked page. The same tactics they tried to use on her, but Elizabeth was smarter. She knew they'd never stop trying to take what women had built. So she created this place, not just as a sanctuary, but as a vault, preserving evidence until the world was ready to hear the truth. My laptop chimed with an email from the Stadio. Historical Board. They were upgrading the beach house's protected status to include its role in documenting architectural gender discrimination. Blake looked lost, his usual confidence shattered. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Would you have listened?" Eleanor asked quietly. "You couldn't even see what was right in front of you, a house full of history, of women's resilience. You were too busy trying to tear it down to build something shiny and new." Emma's team had uncovered another hidden panel, this one containing architectural drawings unlike anything we'd seen before. "These are revolutionary," Emma breathed. She was designing sustainable buildings decades before it became a movement. "Of course she was," Eleanor said proudly. Elizabeth knew the future belonged to those who could build something lasting, something that served more than just profit. Victoria was already drafting press statements, weaving together the historical discoveries with the modern attempt to erase them. Diana coordinated with the Historical Society, ensuring every document would be properly preserved. My phone lit up with a final message from Marcus. "Board of Directors calling emergency session. Firm's entire historical portfolio under review." Blake sank into a chair, the weight of generations of deception finally settling on his shoulders. "What happens now?" Eleanor placed Elizabeth's manuscript in my hands. "Now? Now we do what Elizabeth always intended. We tell the truth, all of it, and we make sure no one ever forgets what happened here, not just in 1924, but in 2025. When another Westbrook man tried to bury another woman's legacy and found himself buried by history instead." The manuscript's pages rustled with promise, with vindication, with the power of stories finally ready to be told. Outside, the media lights illuminated the beach house like a beacon, while inside, generations of women's voices emerged from the walls themselves, demanding to be heard. Eleanor Westbrook's manuscript lay open on the restoration workshop table, its pages carefully protected by archival plastic. Morning sunlight streamed through the newly restored stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across Elizabeth's handwritten revelations. The media circus outside had grown, but Emma's team maintained a careful buffer zone around the property. "Listen to this passage," Diana called out, adjusting her reading glasses. They believe bricks and mortar are the foundation of architecture. They're wrong. The true foundation is justice, the right of every person to create spaces that reflect their vision, regardless of gender. My phone buzzed with an alert from Victoria. Major architectural journal requesting immediate interview. They're calling Elizabeth Whitmore the lost pioneer of sustainable design. A soft knock at the door revealed Cassidy, looking both nervous and determined. The senior partners sent me. They've found more records, decades of systematic suppression of women's architectural contributions. Not just here, but across the country. Eleanor nodded from her seat by the window. Elizabeth suspected as much. It's why she created her network of safe houses, properties designed by women, protected by carefully worded deeds. This beach house was just one node in a vast web of resistance. Emma's restoration team had uncovered another hidden compartment that morning, this one containing correspondence between Elizabeth and female architects from across the globe. The international scope of her network was staggering. Mrs. Westbrook, a young preservationist, called out, "We found something else behind the library panels. It appears to be a film reel." Eleanor's eyes lit up. The testimony. She actually preserved it. Within an hour, a film preservation specialist arrived with portable equipment. The scratchy black and white footage flickered to life on the workshop wall, Elizabeth Whitmore herself, speaking directly to camera in what appeared to be this very room. "To whoever finds this," her voice crackled through decades, "I leave not just a house but a challenge. The men who tried to steal our work believed they could erase us from history. They failed. In these walls, I have hidden the evidence of their systematic theft, their coordinated attempts to deny women our rightful place in the architectural world." My phone lit up with a call from Marcus. "Blake's gone off the grid. His office is cleared out. But he took something with him. Something from the old files." On screen, Elizabeth continued, "But I also leave you proof of our resilience. Every hidden compartment contains not just evidence of their crimes, but testimony to our creativity, our innovation, our unwavering determination to build spaces that reflect our vision." A commotion outside drew us to the windows. Blake's car had returned, but this time he wasn't alone. A group of elderly women emerged from a small convoy of vehicles, some using walkers, others moving with surprising vigor. "Right on time," Eleanor smiled. "The daughters have arrived." The women made their way up the path with purpose. The oldest among them, well into her 90s, carried a leather portfolio identical to the one containing Elizabeth's memoirs. "My mother was one of Elizabeth's students," she announced as she entered. "Grace Chen. She designed civic buildings throughout the Pacific Northwest, though men's names appear on the blueprints. Until now." One by one, the women introduced themselves, daughters, granddaughters, and in some cases, great-granddaughters, of architects whose work had been appropriated by firms like Westbrook and Associates. Each carried documentation, preserved through generations. Blake stood at the edge of the group, clutching an old file box. "I found these in the firm's underground storage, contracts promising to protect women's designs during the Depression, protecting them right into men's portfolios." Grace Chen's daughter, a renowned architect herself, stepped forward. The same tactics they tried to use here, with this development scheme. History repeating itself. Eleanor touched the film reel gently. Elizabeth knew this day would come. She left instructions. When the evidence was finally found, we were to gather. All of us. The inheritors of her legacy. My phone chimed with message after message. Architectural historians, museum curators, documentary filmmakers, all requesting access to Elizabeth's archives. The story had exploded beyond a simple property dispute into something far more profound. Victoria arrived with news from the State Historical Board. They're not just protecting the beach house. They're launching a comprehensive review of architectural attribution throughout the region. Every building, every design. Every theft, Grace Chen finished. Every lie. Emma's team had begun carefully removing sections of wall paneling, revealing more hidden compartments. It's like a physical database, Emma marveled, each space containing another piece of the puzzle. Eleanor opened Elizabeth's manuscript to its final pages. She left instructions for this too, plans for transforming the beach house into a center for women in architecture, a place where future generations could learn not just design, but resilience. Diana was already drafting proposals, coordinating with preservation experts. We'll need to expand the scope of protection. This isn't just about one property anymore. Grace Chen spread her mother's designs across the workshop table. Magnificent. Buildings that had shaped cities, all credited to men. No more hiding, she declared. No more letting them take what we create. Blake set down his box of evidence quietly. I never knew. All those firm histories, the legacy I thought I was protecting. It was built on theft. Now you can help make it right, Eleanor told her grandson. Starting with the truth about this house, about what you tried to do here. My phone lit up with one final message from the British Heritage Trust. They weren't just offering restoration funding anymore. They wanted to establish an international commission on women's architectural history, with the beach house as its first major case study. Outside, more cars arrived. Architects, historians, preservationists, all drawn by the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. Elizabeth's hidden archive wasn't just evidence of past wrongs. It was a blueprint for future justice. Emma stood in the center of the workshop, surrounded by unveiled history. Every hidden compartment, every concealed document, was a message to the future. She believed someone would eventually understand. Grace Chen smiled. She believed in us, all of us, the women who would come after her, carrying forward her fight for recognition, for justice, for the right to create without having our work stolen by men. Eleanor closed the manuscript gently. Now we honor her faith by telling the truth. The whole truth about what was taken, what was hidden, and what can never be suppressed again. The beach house seemed to glow in the morning light, its secrets finally emerging into the open air. Elizabeth Whitmore had built more than just walls and windows. She'd built a testimony, a challenge, and ultimately, a reckoning that would reshape our understanding of architectural history. The International Symposium transformed the beach house's grounds into a temporary campus. White tents dotted the sandy landscape, each one housing exhibits of recovered architectural designs, historical documents, and restoration work in progress. Emma's team had erected a special pavilion for Elizabeth's film reels, now carefully restored and playing on continuous loop. The United Nations Cultural Heritage Committee arrives tomorrow, Victoria announced, navigating through the crowd of architects, historians, and journalists. They're considering expanding the scope of protection to include all identified women's architectural heritage sites. My phone buzzed with an urgent message from Diana. Blake's given a formal statement to the Architectural Ethics Board. Full confession about the development scheme. But there's something else. Before I could respond, a familiar figure appeared. At the edge of the property, Marcus Westbrook, accompanied by a group of distinguished-looking men in suits. The managing partners, Eleanor identified them from her seat in the main tent. All of them. This should be interesting. The senior lawyers moved through the exhibit slowly, their expressions growing more grave with each revelation. Marcus approached our group first, holding a leather-bound ledger. We found this in the firm's original vault, he said quietly. A complete record of properties acquired through questionable means, dating back to 1910. Grace Chen leaned forward. Including my mother's designs? Marcus nodded heavily. All of them, along with financial records showing how the firm systematically undervalued women's properties during forced sales. My laptop chimed with a video call request from the British Heritage Trust. On screen, their director looked excited. "Ms. Thorne, you won't believe what we've discovered in our archives. Elizabeth Whitmore didn't just build in America. She created a network of safe houses across Europe, all sea, protected by similar legal mechanisms." Eleanor smiled knowingly. The Paris property. She always said that would be the key. A young researcher rushed up, clutching a newly decoded document. "Mrs. Westbrook, we've finished translating the letters from the French architect. They reveal a complete underground network of women designers, sharing techniques and protecting each other's work." The senior partners had gathered around Elizabeth's architectural drawings, their legal expertise giving way to genuine awe. "These innovations in sustainable design," one murmured, "decades ahead of their time." Victoria's phone lit up with breaking news alerts. The story's gone global. Architectural firms across the country are launching internal reviews of historical attribution. A gentle commotion at the property's edge drew our attention. Cassidy had arrived with an elderly woman I didn't recognize, but Eleanor did. "Margaret Chen," she breathed. "Grace's mother's protégé." Margaret Chen moved slowly but purposefully through the exhibits, her eyes sharp despite her age. "I was there," she announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet space. "The day they came to take Grace's mother's designs. I watched them strip her name from her life's work." The senior partners shifted uncomfortably, but Margaret wasn't finished. "Elizabeth Whitmore saved more than just documents in these walls. She saved our stories, our truth." My phone buzzed again. Olivia had found something in the hospital. Archives. "Medical records from 1925, her message read, documenting the mental health treatments forced on women architects who resisted having their work appropriated. Emma emerged from the restoration workshop with another discovery: a hidden compartment containing medical files. Elizabeth was collecting evidence of the systematic abuse, she explained, building a case that went far beyond architectural theft. A sleek car pulled up to the property and Blake stepped out. But instead of his usual aggressive entrance, he moved quietly through the exhibits, taking in the scope of what his family's firm had done. "The development company is facing a federal investigation," he said when he reached us. "They found similar patterns in their historical acquisitions, properties taken from women during periods of manufactured financial distress." Eleanor patted the seat beside her. "Sit down, grandson. It's time you heard the full story of your heritage. Not the one the firm told, but the true one." As Blake sat, Grace Chen and her fellow architects' daughters gathered around. One by one, they shared their mother's stories, brilliant women whose work had shaped cities, only to have their contributions erased by powerful men and their legal mechanisms. My laptop chimed again. The United Nations team had arrived early. They moved through the exhibits with professional interest that quickly turned to profound concern. "This isn't just about architecture," their lead investigator noted. "This is about systematic suppression of women's contributions to the built environment, a pattern that appears to have replicated globally." Victoria was already coordinating with international legal teams, building a framework for addressing historical architectural attribution. Diana worked with preservation experts, ensuring every document would be properly protected and archived. A group of young architecture students had gathered around Elizabeth's film reels, watching in rapt attention as she detailed her methods for hiding evidence within the very structures men sought to claim. "She didn't just preserve history," Emma observed. "She encoded it into the buildings themselves. Every hidden compartment, every secret space, was part of a larger testimony." Marcus approached Blake, who sat still absorbing the weight of these revelations. "Son, the firm's board has made a decision. We're establishing a foundation for architectural restitution, using firm profits to fund research into women's uncredited contributions." Eleanor opened Elizabeth's manuscript to a previously overlooked page. She predicted this too. "When the truth finally emerges," she read, "it will not be enough to simply acknowledge the theft. There must be restoration, not just of buildings, but of legacy. My phone lit up with a message from the State Historical Board. They weren't just protecting individual properties anymore. They were creating a new category of historical designation: sites of gender justice in architecture. The beach house would be the first property listed, not just for its architectural significance, but for its role in preserving evidence of women's resistance to systematic erasure. Grace Chen stood slowly, her daughter supporting her arm. "We've carried these stories for generations," she said, looking out over the assembled crowd, waiting for the moment when the world was ready to hear them. Eleanor closed Elizabeth's manuscript gently. She built this house as a sanctuary, yes, but more importantly, she built it as a witness. Every beam, every panel, every hidden space was designed to eventually testify to the truth. The setting sun cast long shadows through the property's restored stained glass windows, creating patterns that seemed to write their own story across the exhibition floors. Elizabeth Whitmore had created more than just a beautiful building. She'd created a time capsule of justice, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. The inaugural ceremony for the Women's Architectural Heritage Center transformed the beach house into something Elizabeth Whitmore might have recognized from her own time, a gathering place for visionary women. Architects from across the globe filled the restored rooms, their conversations echoing off walls that had protected their predecessors' legacies for nearly a century. "The Paris Safe House has been located," Emma announced, hurrying through the crowd with her tablet. Hidden in plain sight all these years, disguised as a modest apartment building, but the interior. She pulled up photographs that made the assembled architects gasp. The Parisian property contained its own archive of hidden documents, architectural drawings, and correspondence, a mirror to what we'd discovered here. My phone buzzed with an urgent message from Victoria. International architectural firms launching major initiative. Full review of historical attribution, with focus on identifying uncredited women designers. Eleanor sat in Elizabeth's restored study, now converted into a reading room for researchers. She would have loved this, she mused, watching young architecture students pore over newly discovered drawings. The next generation, finally learning the true history of their profession. A quiet knock at the door revealed Blake, looking different somehow, humbled, but also purposeful. "The Foundation's first grants are ready for distribution," he said, holding out a thick folder. "Full funding for 10 women-led architectural preservation projects." Before I could respond, Diana burst in with breaking news. The United Nations just announced a global commission on architectural justice. They want to use the beach house's documentation model as a template for investigating similar cases worldwide. Grace Chen's daughter, now heading her own prestigious firm, stepped forward. "We're not just preserving history anymore. We're rewriting it, correctly this time." My laptop chimed with a video call from the British Heritage Trust's archaeological team in Paris. "You need to see this," their lead researcher announced. The Safe House network wasn't just about protecting designs, it was an entire underground movement of women supporting each other's professional advancement. Emma's restoration team had made another discovery that morning, a cache of letters between Elizabeth and female architects across Europe and Asia. They were creating their own professional development network, Emma explained, sharing techniques, innovations, clients, all hidden from the men who tried to control their work. A group of international journalists had gathered on the beach, house's restored veranda, broadcasting live updates about the expanding scope of architectural reattribution. "This isn't just an American story anymore," one reported. "It's a global reckoning with systematic gender discrimination in design professions." Marcus appeared with more files from the firm's archives. "We've identified 37 major buildings previously credited to male architects, all actually designed by women whose work was appropriated." Eleanor opened Elizabeth's manuscript to a previously sealed section. Listen to this. They believe they are taking our buildings, our designs, our professional dignity, but they cannot take our vision. We encode it into every beam, every arch, every hidden space. Someday someone will understand the message we've built into these walls. My phone lit up with messages from architectural preservation groups worldwide, each reporting similar discoveries. Hidden compartments in historic buildings, containing evidence of women's uncredited contributions. Elizabeth's network had been more extensive than anyone imagined. A young architecture student approached our group, clutching a drawing she'd discovered in the archives. "This isn't just about architecture," she said passionately. "These women were designing spaces that challenged male assumptions about how buildings should function. They were revolutionaries." Victoria coordinated with international legal teams, building frameworks for addressing historical wrongs. Diana worked with preservation experts, ensuring the evidence would be properly protected for future generations. Blake stood quietly in Elizabeth's study, surrounded by the proof of what his family had tried to destroy. "I'm stepping down from the Foundation's board," he announced. "It should be led by women, the descendants of those who were wronged." Grace Chen's daughter nodded approvingly. "The first step in restoration is knowing when to step aside." My laptop chimed with another urgent message. The Paris team had found something extraordinary. Hidden in the safe house's walls were designs for sustainable urban communities, created by women architects in the 1930s. Ideas so advanced they could help address modern climate challenges. They weren't just fighting for recognition, Emma breathed, examining the drawings. They were trying to build a better world. Eleanor touched the restored wooden panels that had protected Elizabeth's legacy. She knew this day would come, when the truth couldn't be contained anymore, when all their hidden innovations would finally see light. The beach house seemed to glow in the afternoon sun, its restored features highlighting the brilliance of its original design. But now we understood it wasn't just a beautiful building, it was a message, a testimony, a challenge to future generations. International architecture students moved through the exhibits, their faces alight with discovery. Young women from dozens of countries, seeing their professional heritage clearly for the first time. "This changes everything," one said, examining Elizabeth's sustainable design principles. "Not just how we view history, but how we move forward." Victoria's phone buzzed with news from the Architectural Ethics Board. Firms across the globe were establishing new protocols for crediting historical contributions, ensuring women's work would never again be hidden or stolen. "Elizabeth didn't just preserve evidence of theft," Eleanor said, watching the next generation explore her cousin's legacy. "She preserved proof of women's innovative spirit, our determination to shape the built environment, despite every obstacle." My phone lit up with a final message. The United Nations had officially designated the beach house as the first World Heritage Site, specifically recognizing women's contributions to architecture. But more importantly, they were launching a global initiative to identify and protect similar sites of resistance and creativity. Grace Chen's mother's designs would be officially reattributed. The Paris Safe House would become a European center for studying women's architectural history, and Elizabeth Whitmore's name would finally take its rightful place among history's great designers. Looking out over the waves from Elizabeth's favorite window, I understood what my grandfather had protected wasn't just a property. It was a link in a chain of women's resistance and resilience, stretching across time and continents. "They tried to bury us," Eleanor said softly, quoting a line from Elizabeth's manuscript. "They didn't know we were seeds." The beach house stood proud against the horizon, no longer just my sanctuary, but a beacon for truth and justice in architecture. Elizabeth had built more than walls and rooms. She'd built a testament to women's indomitable creative spirit, waiting for the moment when the world was ready to receive its message. 1 year after Elizabeth Whitmore's legacy emerged from the beach house walls, I stood in the newly completed Heritage Center's Grand Hall, watching as hundreds of women, architects from around the world, gathered for its official opening. The space that Blake had once planned to demolish now housed the world's largest archive of women's architectural history. "The London renovation team just arrived," Emma announced, guiding a group of preservation specialists through the exhibition space. "They've identified 3 more safe houses in European cities, each containing its own hidden archive." My phone lit up with messages from Victoria, coordinating simultaneous ceremonies at newly discovered sites across the globe. Women architects in Paris, Tokyo, and Melbourne stood ready to unveil their own preserved legacies, all connected virtually to our celebration. Diana appeared at my side, holding a beautifully bound book, the first complete publication of Elizabeth's manuscripts, alongside newly discovered documents from safe houses worldwide. "The initial print run sold out in hours," she reported. "Universities are already adding it to their architectural history curricula." Eleanor Westbrook, now serving as the Heritage Center's honorary chairwoman, sat in Elizabeth's restored study, surrounded by young architecture students. "Tell us again," one urged, "about the day you first understood what your cousin had created here." A soft knock interrupted the story. Blake stood in the doorway, transformed from the arrogant lawyer who'd tried to sell my home. His new role? Leading the Architectural Restitution Foundation had changed him profoundly. "The last of the reattribution ceremonies is complete," he announced quietly. "Every building we've identified has been officially credited to its true designer." Grace Chen's daughter stepped forward with an update from the International Architectural Commission. "We've established new protocols for preserving women's contributions. No design will ever go uncredited again." My laptop chimed with a video call from Cassidy, now heading her own ethical development firm focused on preserving historical properties. "The Paris Safe House restoration is ahead of schedule," she reported excitedly. "And you won't believe what we found behind the library panels." The assembled crowd gathered around as Cassidy held up intricate architectural drawings, designs, for sustainable urban communities that seemed decades ahead of their time. "These women weren't just fighting for recognition," she explained. "They were designing the future." Emma's restoration team had made one final discovery that morning. A message from Elizabeth, carved into a beam in the beach house's highest point. "To those who find this," Emma read aloud, "know that our work was never just about buildings. It was about creating spaces where future generations could thrive, unfettered by those who would deny their gifts." Adelaide, now in her 90s, but still sharp as ever, surveyed the transformed property with satisfaction. Elizabeth would have loved seeing all these young women here, learning their true professional heritage. International news crews captured the moment as simultaneous ribbon cuttings occurred at safe houses across the globe. On screens throughout the Heritage Center, we watched women architects in different countries unveil their own preserved histories. Marcus Westbrook stood with his sister Margaret, watching as the firm's complete archives were officially transferred to the Heritage Center's permanent collection. 100 years of hidden history, Margaret mused, finally seeing light. My phone buzzed with a message from the United Nations Cultural Committee. They were expanding their architectural heritage program, using our documentation model to investigate similar cases worldwide. Eleanor opened Elizabeth's manuscript to its final pages, her voice carrying across the now quiet space. "They thought they could erase us from history," she read. "But we built our testimony into the very walls they sought to claim. We knew that someday, someone would understand our message." Victoria approached with news from the Architectural Ethics Board. Firms around the world were adopting new standards for crediting historical contributions, ensuring women's work would never again be hidden or stolen. A group of young architects gathered around Elizabeth's original drafting table, now restored and centered in the Heritage Center's main hall. "It's not just about the past anymore," one observed. It's about ensuring this never happens again. My laptop chimed with updates from preservation teams worldwide. More hidden compartments discovered, more evidence preserved, more women's legacies restored to their rightful place in architectural history. Blake stood quietly in the corner, watching as his grandmother shared Elizabeth's story with another group of students. "I finally understand," he said softly. "This house was never just property. It was a guardian of truth." The setting sun cast brilliant colors through Elizabeth's restored stained glass windows, illuminating the gathered crowd. Women architects from every continent, united in celebrating their recovered heritage and planning for a more equitable future. Grace Chen's daughter raised her glass in a toast to Elizabeth Whitmore, who built not just a house, but a testimony. To every woman who encoded her truth into stone and wood and glass, trusting that someday we would find it. Eleanor added her own words. To the safe houses that protected our legacy, and to the women who will carry it forward. Diana lifted her glass. To justice in architecture, long delayed but finally served, Emma's voice joined in. To hidden spaces that preserved our history, and to open spaces where we'll write our future. Victoria completed the toast. To every woman who refused to let her vision be stolen, who built her defiance into every beam and brick. I looked around at these women, architects, preservationists, historians, students, all gathered in the space that Blake had once tried to destroy. Elizabeth's sanctuary had become exactly what she intended: a beacon of truth, a center of learning, a testament to women's resilience. My phone lit up one final time. A message from a young architecture student in Tokyo, standing in their own newly discovered safe house. "We found another hidden archive," she wrote. "The story keeps growing." The beach house glowed in the evening light, its windows illuminated from within by the celebrations of hundreds of women reclaiming their professional heritage.